start. Today's our distribution day, and we start the morning with a special presentation. We're doing a state of the industry with distribution. So each day we will be starting off with a state of, depending on the programmatic theme of the day. And with us this morning is Bob Berney, and Bob is the CEO of Picturehouse, which, as many of you probably know, is one of the preeminent and a leading distribution marketing house based in New York, distribution company. Bob founded Picturehouse in 2005, originally as a joint venture with HBO and New Line. Through the merger and acquisition period, which there was quite a bit of tumultuous change in the industry in the late 2000s, Picturehouse closed its doors and relaunched in 2013 with President Jeannie. Jeannie, are you here? Hi, Jeannie. Hi, Jeannie. So Bob and Jeannie, who are known to be tastemakers and innovators in the industry, long-standing veterans and very well respected, and now here with us with the launch of Picturehouse. And Bob has been is known for such titles as Pan's Labyrinth, Prairie House Companion, Memento, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, Y Tu Mama Tambien, The Passion of Christ. Last year they were here with Metallica, and this year they're here with The Guest, which is going to actually be closing our Midnight Madness on the 13th. I will allow Bob to join us on the stage. He has an amazing presentation set out. He's going to really just break it down and let you guys know what's happening in the distribution industry. Immediately after Bob, we will go straight into our panel on day and date releases. So after the session, if you could please keep your seats, and we will launch straight into the other session. But without further ado, please help me welcome Bob Berney, CEO of Picturehouse.
Thank you, Renee. Welcome. I'd just like to start, if we could talk with a first clip here. I just want to show you our beautiful logo for Picturehouse. So if we could run that, please. When we first did Picturehouse, which was part of HBO and New Line, we had all that. Then as she said, it all kind of folded. But recently, we were able to get the name, the logo, everything back from Warner Brothers. So it was really great to sort of be able to have that back and get that out of a big studio, which usually they don't like to give anything back, but they were very nice, I have to say, and give it back. So welcome to the Glenn Gould studio, and that's really a treat for me just to be in an auditorium named Glenn Gould, so such a fan, it's beautiful. I want to talk about the state of distribution is the topic, and it's really, I think, we talk about everywhere, but in the U.S., it's really in a chaotic, disruptive state right now, with the bigger studios continuing to make fewer but bigger tentpole, massive budget films, big bets. And even though the summer kind of blockbuster business was down quite a bit from previous years, it's still huge. And there have been a lot of hits in the multiplexes and successful independent traditional theatrical releases and multi-platform releases as well. The studios have been looking at buying each other. The management is in flux, kind of, I think, in all of them. Outside production companies are becoming the huge players with the big studios, very influential in shaping, what they're doing. Companies like Legendary and this new company with Bob Simons, it's not named yet, so billionaires seem to be popping up all over the place, making movies for the studios and for everybody. It's an interesting time. But I think in all this chaos lies a lot of opportunity. There are more outlets now than at any time to get your film out, to get films out. And I think I think the trick to it is, from a filmmaker's point of view or a producer, how do you take advantage of this in a way that makes good business sense for you to be able to fund your movies or get revenue from distribution, because it's so radically changing. There are a lot of paths to take with the expansion of new multi-platform releases, digital distribution, and shortened windows for theatrical. There's aggregators of all these type of digital outlets, micro distributors, wealthy buyers that just come into the places like Toronto and just buy films without any plan. They just buy a movie. They just want to be in the film business. So you've seen a lot of that, of just people that buy films and then try and figure out what to do with them later. These larger companies that have been around for a while, like Magnolia in the States and IFC Films, really pioneered multi-platform, or where something's on VOD and in theaters the same date. I think there'll be a panel right after this really talking about that further. Newer companies like Radius that do it, Catch-Up Entertainment. All these companies are providing new opportunities for film distribution. And there have been a lot of films, busy year too for wide release films. Companies like Open Road, which is owned by one of the two largest exhibitors in the States, Regal and AMC, and Relativity Media are distributing wide release films. And there's a new arrangement at Focus in the States too, that it's more of a wide release genre company now. But films that fit into kind of the traditional theatrical window that I've always done, platform releases, sort of starting in where you start in 2 or 3 cities and expand week to week, getting pretty big. I think those films are having a bit tougher time finding a home. A lot of those films are here in Toronto, the high-profile films, because there's fewer distributors doing that. So a lot of the micro distributors are multi-platform growing, but you have Sony Classics, the Weinstein Company, Fox Searchlight, A24, and Picturehouse doing those, but there's probably more films that fit that kind of distribution than there are slots available or distribution companies for those films. Those are films that, like I said, go in 2 to 10 cities and platform out. And I think despite these new platforms, the theatrical release is still currently the only way for a film to truly break out in a big way. There's a few outliers that people talk about, Margin Call or Bachelorette, but it's tough to find examples other than those few yet in the new kind of day and date platforms. So many of the films here are probably looking initially to find a theatrical deal, and it's probably tough. The bar for the theatrical release has really been raised. It's more expensive. Even with digital marketing, it's still pretty expensive and competitive. And I think as a distributor or somebody that's providing the marketing money for a big theatrical release, you have to be very, very passionate about a film and very wary of the expense it takes to do it. So I think the bar's really higher, but there's other ways to do it, which is great. And if you think about, not that long ago, there weren't many options. If I look at this summer, for example, you had a lot of independent films play over the summer against the studio blockbusters. Boyhood, Magic in the Moonlight, Chef, Belle, Begin Again, and these indie platform release films really did well. In some cases, I think, surpassing anybody's expectations for those films. They just kept going and playing and staying in the theaters. And I think one reason was there was nothing else to see. There were not a lot of films in theaters, independent films in theaters over the summer. And there could have been, I think, at least 4 or 5 more films that would have, the marketplace would have allowed that. I think people saw these films over and over again. People went back or they stayed in theaters longer just hanging around because there was no other films to play. And I think that's an interesting thing. With all these, with all the films that you see here at Toronto, everything, that somehow in distribution this summer, the bigger platform release companies, all these companies didn't pick up enough films to really, I think, support the audience that was there. So that, and everything's timing. You can come into the fall right after Toronto, and it's crowded, but it's interesting that if you spread it out a bit, that the marketplace can expand. I think the audiences really want quality, content, which we used to call movies. Everything's now, it's content companies. But filmmakers have great ideas, and distributors have the methods to connect them to the audience, and that's really our job. Multi-platform or day and date, meaning you're going VOD and theatrical, or ultra, VOD before theatrical, or providing a huge number of slots now for films that either haven't been offered traditional theatrical deals, or they're just they didn't want to take those deals and it's too expensive. But till recently, these films would be considered kind of busted theatricals or almost theatricals, or straight to VOD or straight to video. So I think the whole perception of that has changed. So it's really an interesting time for films. Everything has to kind of find their own level and find their own way. Some of these companies, they'll probably talk about later, are starting to report their numbers, their VOD numbers, just like the theatrical box office has been reported. There's probably no continuum of data yet to really make sense of those, and the deals are so different on these. You never know what even if you know the VOD numbers, you don't know the cost of the film, or what happened, or what international value is in it. It's hard to tell the profitability, but it'll start to give us an idea to compare. Different experimental, combinations of theatrical and VOD, or direct TV. We've seen direct TV in the States playing films before theatrical now. They're all generating new ways to get a film out. But the deals that come with these can be really tough or small for the producers or filmmakers. I don't think we've seen yet a lot of, really on the business side, profits or successful stories, or a lot of people talking about how it's starting to happen, but it's early days. A lot of the films, I think, that 5, 6, 8 years ago were made by, say, the large European companies, or maybe the indie divisions of U.S. studios, aren't finding the deals viable now. I think a lot of sales companies, when they look at the U.S. or even North America, cut when they prepare their P&Ls, they probably put 0 or almost nothing in, because you can't count on. It's been a while where you couldn't count on a sale in North America if you're budgeting that. So a lot of budgets have been reduced, and I think it's just a matter of leveling out what you can spend on a film in relation to what the distribution and payback or business arrangements will be. And so we've seen a lot of smaller films to fit this new distribution pattern. As I said earlier, these boutique distributors or people that aren't even distributors are popping up everywhere and buying films, and they can sort of think they can flip it, buy something here and flip it to a digital aggregator if it has some kind of cast or name recognition. And that wasn't possible not very many years ago. Whether it'll ever actually come out and generate revenue is I'm not sure, but your film's getting bought. And there's a hunger in all these places for more content. Like with VOD, is when any new format comes along, you can play almost anything for a while until the audience starts getting more sophisticated. So there's no one way to release a film now. There's no simple method, and I'm still a really big believer and advocate in the theatrical experience. But I think in any way you release the film, big or small, you have to create some kind of event. It has to be an event to get the audience to pay attention with so many things in the market. So whether they can talk about it in person, through social media, you have to find a way to make your film stand out in the marketing. Each film has to have a customized, handcrafted marketing plan. So as more of these platforms become available, no kind of one-size plan or distribution method would fit any film. Every film's different. So I think curating the films, picking the films, is going to be really more and more important as the platforms continue to grow. Whether it's for day and date or VOD or theatrical, I think given the risk and expense, it's really important to pick films you're passionate about, come up with a plan that's very different for each film, and figure out how to make it work, how to survive, how to make money so that you can do another one. It's also, I think, amazing to see how resilient the sort of traditional, home entertainment market is too. I think we kind of forget about it in VOD, but it's even though it might be, slowly dying out, it's really slow because it's still there. Like the Blu-ray market in the States, like with Walmart or Redbox, is still, for certain genres and everything, huge. It still makes a big difference. And the theatrical opportunities are really changing now. There are many, really cool advances happening in cinemas, and I think the experience is getting better and better, and that's also going to change trends as well. Just a few examples. In the U.S., AMC Theaters has retrofitted a lot of their older theaters with these huge kind of lounge chair seats. They were calling them fat seats, and I was like, I think you need a new name. But the idea is like they've reduced their seating capacity in their auditoriums by 50%. And they didn't raise the price, and yet their revenues are up 50%. So they're just finding ways to kind of spread out, make it a better experience, spread out the show times, and people are going to more different times to be in these theaters. And there's one in New York on 84th and Broadway that was always kind of the theater that you took if you couldn't get the one up the street, and now it's the one you want. So it's really interesting. ArcLight Cinemas, Pacific Theaters, has these huge, beautiful screens with really great digital projection sound, no commercials before the movie. They're expanding into Washington, into Chicago, Santa Monica, New York. It's going to make, their sort of mission is to show the films the way the directors meant it to be seen. So it's a very big theatrical experience. Alamo Drafthouse Theaters in the U.S. are also expanding. There's this concept of, having dinner and drinks in the theaters, and as are a lot of the theaters. But they're very different because they do this great job of programming interstitial content before the movie. So people get there an hour early and watch these, short films, old drive-in movie trailers, comedy, all this stuff that has become, it's amazing. It's really good, and they have local managers that program this stuff, and it's a different experience, along with, IMAX or the large format screens that all the exhibitors have, 3D, 4D now. Now it's come back to like, the seats shaking and you're sprayed with water. It's like John Waters' Smell-O-Vision. It's all new, but I think it increases the theatrical experience, and it's that community and people coming together. There's one in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, the Nighthawk, that's kind of like the Alamo. Great audience. I remember when they were having trouble getting films at first because people were like, "What is this?" And what's this? Are they just coming there to eat? And then we gave them Drive. That was one of their first films that really took off. So, it's interesting the way exhibition theater owners are responding to all these, perceived, threats, I guess you say. I think the point is there's a lot of screens, but you still have to be special. You still have to have a plan that makes your film stand out within these things. So it's scary to open a theatrical film if you're really not optimistic that there's an audience for that film. The marketing and curatorial formula is critical to be tied in with the acquisition or production decisions, to do it as a team. So we're at festivals really looking at how we respond to the film, the critics, but how we feel we can ultimately, sell it to the public. I think finding the best solution for each film is important on any level. The theater chains are nervous about these new formats and windows changing. They're worried about losing audiences to home screens or phones, and they push back on a lot of levels to these new windowing ideas. So, in each of the companies in the U.S., they have varying degrees of response to this. Regal, the largest chain, and Cinemark, the third, have been reluctant to try any day and date. They just won't do it. And AMC has been more open to experimenting, but kind of at a steep price when you have to rent their theater. I'm sure formulas will come out where you share some of the home entertainment revenue with the theaters, but two of the players in the U.S., IFC and Magnolia, own their own theaters. So they're the ones been in the forefront because they own their own theaters and can make their own rules and have been doing a lot of films. IFC and Magnolia probably do, IFC probably buys 50 or 60 films a year. So it's think about that. And Magnolia, without that a few years ago, not that long ago, it's a lot of films that, where would they have gone, those smaller films? But here in Canada and in many other countries, you don't have that. Either due to government regulations or the power of the theater change, the monopoly they have is going to prevent any kind of experimentation or day and date. I don't think there's any policy here because Cineplex is the only exhibitor. So, it's in their interest to stall all that. So it's interesting. There's a lot of talk about being screen agnostic, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot of it on the next panel. People saying, well, a screen is a screen is a screen. It doesn't matter. It was the arc light that I was talking about earlier. That's the same as your phone. People don't care. I don't know. I think you have to match the experience, the film with the distribution. I still believe it's a community experience, and seeing that in a big theater is pretty great. I mean, that's why you come to the Toronto Film Festival, to experience that together. I think there's a lot of opportunities for certain films, but I'm still a big believer, and I think that other films in our world, as we expand at Picturehouse, will include that. But I don't want to forget, as we talk about all the new models, that the power of the existing model and where right now films are still breaking out. Every movie doesn't have that potential, and so we're really, I think, fortunate in the U.S. to have these options to give more and more films an opportunity to be seen. But it's still early days, and the business model, I don't think, has been quite figured out. On the digital front, I think it's always important to mention companies like Netflix, because they've really been a game changer in terms of independent film and theatrical distribution. They've been a great partner to Picturehouse, and they've given us a boost by giving us streaming deals in the subscription VOD area, which has been traditionally the pay TV window, like HBO or Starz. Was always tough for us to get the HBO deal, even when the original Picturehouse was owned by HBO, we had a tough time. They were great, but we on Pan's Labyrinth, because it was in Spanish, it wouldn't fit in our HBO deal, so we were able to sell it to Netflix, and that was like really one of the first streaming deals that Netflix did. So they've been fantastic, and they're going to grow, and they're going to do original programming and probably some kind of different windowing there too. It's been important. I think social media tools are creating advanced awareness for films, allowing marketing executives to be more targeted and more traditional with both traditional and digital media. So we can use social media early and spend our media dollars closer to the opening of the film theatrically, which is getting us just a lot further along, able to compete with bigger films. And the data collected from the digital platforms and hopefully now from exhibitors as they do a lot of, affinity programs, everything, really help us reach the audience. Getting trailers, clips, viral pieces out broadly have built pre-release awareness that like never before. The trailer is still our strongest tool, and the digital platforms really help that. Festivals like Toronto play a vital role in introducing audiences to new films. So the number of options is really inspirational. It wasn't long when the choices were limited and the gatekeepers really controlled it. Two of the early films I worked on were Happiness and Memento, and it's hard to imagine now that those films had no offers for distribution, or they were going to be banned. Happiness was going to be banned. No one would do it. No one understood Memento because it was backwards. But we're talking about just a few gatekeepers at the time, and I was sort of like able to sort of do it the DIY method. I found producers that had the ability to fund the marketing of those, and really kind of did it initially out of my house. They weren't rent-a-system deals like you hear about. They were fully formed marketing campaigns, and I had relationships with exhibitors, but it just showed that if you went around the few gatekeepers at the time and said, look, Memento's a fantastic film. It's a film noir. It's a thriller. Yes, it's backwards, but the elements are there, and the audience can figure it out, I think. But so today, there's so many films, so many ways to get films distributed, and still the money part, the business side's got to catch up. I've usually been very independent, even when we were owned by New Line, but it's still about connecting the filmmakers and the audience, and that's what I want Picturehouse to represent, a community which we're picking interesting projects that brings people together. Just quickly, our next film, as she mentioned earlier, is playing it's closing midnight, the Midnight Madness series, which has become, again, a fantastic source of acquisitions. It's become the hot place to buy a movie and launch word of mouth. It's directed by Adam Wingard, written by Simon Barrett, produced by Keith and Jessica Calder, a great independent team that's done several films. They're based in Los Angeles. They made the film You're Next last year. So I wanted to roll a brief TV spot just to show you kind of what we're up to now, if we could run that.
Excuse me, ma'am. You wouldn't happen to have seen this man, would you?
Well, he just went inside.
Rated R.
Who are you?
I'm a friend of the family. Visiting theaters Wednesday, September 17th.
A lot of the actor Dan Stevens, some of you know, he was in Downton Abbey, and he famously quit the show and wanted to come make indie films and become a star. And we've had these research screenings and stuff where some of the fans of Downton Abbey come and they go, we just came to see him because we were so pissed that he left the show. We want him to fail, and then, it's like, okay, But then after that, they go, we love him again, and we like him now as the buffed out Texas accent action hero. So it's a big change, but it's really exciting to work on a film that really produced completely independently, and having actors like Dan wanted to take a chance on doing something completely out of the role they were being typecast in. So, and then to have it included at Midnight Madness, which is such a great launching point, it's really special. So I wanted to thank Toronto for that, and thank you for listening to me go on. We're gonna bring out Matt Belloni and another panel to talk about VOD and date, which I'm sure will continue some of this discussion that I've started. But thank you very much for listening. Thanks a lot. Enjoy it.